What's going on, folks? Welcome to another episode of All Around. I'm your host, Carter Dudley, and as you can see in a big A10 battle, George Mason takes down VCU 86-80. They improved to 16-1 on the season, and George Mason was led by Fatt Hill, came through huge and clutch with a lot of clutch free throws to close it out. 16 points and 5 rebounds for Riley Allenspach with 16 points. Kory Mincy added 15 points and 5 assists and 3 rebounds. And Jahari Long posted 14 points, 5 assists. For VCU, they was led by Lazar Djokovic, who led with a game high 23 points and 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Terrence Hill Jr., 16.6 rebounds, 4 assists. And Brandon Jennings and Full Michael Bell added 11 points apiece. Oh, man, there was a intense battle, to say the least, as you expect between these two rivals. That this is a rivalry that go back to the CAA days before they both moved to the A10. And preseason, VCU was picked to be picked first in the preseason poll for the conference, and George Mason was at the top of the league as well. But as things have turned out, VCU is currently in the middle of the pack, the top half, of the A10 currently, and George Mason's clearly in first place. After this win, they improved to 16-1. So with their only blemishes on the road at Virginia Tech. Like I said, it was an intense battle, as you would expect. In the first half, they both came out kind of filling each other out. Both, slow offense, more of a defensive battle. Two heavyweights in a sense, just trying, like in a boxing match, two heavyweights trying to, fill themselves out. For George Mason, Riley Allenspach got it going right away. Had a couple jump hooks, couple post baskets in the paint to kind of, give them a cushion. But then on the other side, you had Djokovic right there with him producing, and then Brandon Jennison and Terrence Hill Jr. Terrence Hill Jr. was producing as well, scoring at will. He shot the leather off the ball in the first half. And then once they got a feel for each other, which was about 7-7, 9-7 VCU, then you started seeing the offenses get going. And then many guys started chipping in. Riley Allenspach, picked up a couple fouls, so he had to go to the bench, and that kind of stymied George Mason's offense for a bench, and VCU took advantage. Like I said, behind Terrence Hill Jr., who went off for 12 points in the first half on 4 of 8 shooting. He had 2 of 5 from deep. But he also had 4 rebounds and 3 assists in the first half. He was not only was he scoring, he was making the right reads. I mean, he was hitting some tough shots. I mean, like fadeaways from 3-point range with 2 people on him contesting. He was unconscious in the first half, and then that allowed VCU to kind of have a lead, towards the later portion of the first half. And then Messiah Troutman was getting it done on both ends. Couple steals, got on transition, scored. He was 4 for 6 in the first half, had 11 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. He was standing out big time, especially defensively, and he used defense to get him going offensively, which is something that more players should look to do instead of just always solely looking at the offensive end. And then Kory Mincy, their leading scorer, doing what he always does. He had 10 points and 4 of 6 shooting in the first half, and along with 3 assists. Fast Hill came in, gave him a little change of pace, so to speak. And he had 5 points in the first half and 2 of 5 shooting, man. And Jahari Long, who was running the point, he only took 2 shots. Didn't score in the first half, only took 2 shots. Remember, I said that as I get later into this recap show about Jahari Long. Like I said, 0 points in the first half, 0-2 shooting, but he had 3 assists. So he was controlling the pace at will, keeping VCU in there, just controlling the game, keeping G'd up George Mason in the flow that best fit their personnel. Even though VCU was pressing, throwing a lot of different traps and stuff, being aggressive, trying to get them out of rhythm and make them play a sped up game, which is what VCU thrives in. So at the first at half, George Mason managed to hold a 38-37 lead. At the half, they had they shot 53% from the field, 37% from deep, 75% from the free throw line. Now VCU shot 44% from the field, 33% from deep, but they stayed in it because they were 7-10 from the line. They was getting to the line led by Djokovic, who's being a grown man. That's no other way of putting it. Rolling to the basket, driving, getting hit, and if he didn't score, he was getting to the line. Terrence Hill Jr. got to the line a couple times as well. Barry Evans got to the line, but he was 1 of 4. So, would have been different if he would have hit his free throws, at the half. You know what I mean? So VCU rebounded them 18-14 in the first half. You know what I mean? VCU also had 27 bench points to George Mason 11. Obviously, most of that was from Terrence Hill Jr., who led the way with 12 in the game at half. But George Mason countered that with 24 points in the paint, to VCU's 14. So, like I said, the first half was just kind of a back and forth affair for the most part. Then the second half started, and VCU came out blazing. Man, they started out on a 7-0 run. Djokovic was going to work. He was going to work. He came out going to work. Brandon Jennings joined the party, in the second half as well. And you know what I mean? So they had it going. But the story of this game is poise. And and that makes sense as I keep going along on this. The poise was that George Mason, even though VCU went on that run, George Mason didn't really blink. They just slowed things down. Tony Skinn called a timeout, got them under control, and then they were able to, navigate things. And Jahari Long was the catalyst for that. Remember I said he didn't score in the first half. He more than made up for that in the second half. Second half, he had 14 points and 5 of 8 shooting, 4-4 from the free throw line, 2 rebounds and 2 assists, along with him controlling the game, being the primary, the primary along with him being the primary, the primary ball handler, controlling the game, and just keeping the flow offense going in GW's favor at the style that they want to play with. He started scoring, and he scored from multiple levels: mid-range, post, mid-post. He got it done. You know what I mean? And he used his size to overwhelm VCU's guards. And VCU got some big athletic guards, but he's a little bit bigger, 6'4", 6'5", and he just took his time, got to his spots, and knocked down the shot mid-range. 1 dribble pull-ups, 2 dribble pull-ups, get the ball up, run off-ball screen, run off-ball action, go right into the post, and then he went to work with a bunch of jump hooks. And then when he wasn't scoring, if he did miss, Riley Otterspots was cleaning up, or he was going to work. He was killing them with jump hooks. He was perfect in the second half. He had 10 points for 4 shooting, and 2 rebounds. So that combination not only allowed George Mason to get back in the game, but also, to overcome that 7-0 start by VCU in the second half, but also retake the lead. And then, it was just a matter of them just staying with it, which they did. Behind Jahari Long, Kory, Mincy, and like Masai Troutman, he had 11. He only had 2 points in the second half, but he didn't need to score. He was only 1 of 3. But he really didn't need to score. His defense came through big time. Like I said, Kory Mincy only had 5 points, but 2 rebounds, 2 assists. But he was also huge and helping control tempo in George Mason's favor when he, when VCU obviously brought their inevitable press that overwhelmed a lot of teams, and he hit a big dagger jumper himself in mid range late in the game. They kind of sealed the deal. So he was still plugged in, but with Jahari having it going and Riley having it going, it was no need. And then the VCU, they made a run. It's like George Mason. They got the lead up to 9 late, and it looked like they was about to pull away. Then VCU came back with a run, and then they got it back up to 9 again, and then VCU came with a run. And Djokovic was consistent. He had 15 points and 5 or 6 shooting in the second half, 5 of 5 from the free throw line with 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He was a grown man. He even had a vicious dunk against George Mason that I'm sure is making this round going viral right now. Michael Bell added 7 points. But the reason why VCU was able to make that surge late was because of Nick Lewis. Nick Lewis, they had the ideal first half. Local product out of Gonzaga, all met. Top 100 player, talented point guard. He had 0 points and 3 rebounds and 1 assist, 0-2 shooting, 2 fouls in the first half. Not ideal. But in the second half, he came live. He had 10 points, 3 of 7 from the field, 2 of 4 from deep, 2 of 4 from the free throw line, 5 rebounds. He hit some big-time threes late to keep VCU within striking distance, man, make it a game where GW, my apologies, I don't know why I keep saying GW, George Mason had to literally make every free throw just about to hold off a game VCU team that was trying to late take the game. And Nick Lewis had a lot to do with that with the dagger threes he had, along with Jennings and all that, and Djokovic. They was carrying the load offensively late, but George Mason was too much down the stretch. And Fatt Hill, I'm gonna keep saying that Fatt Hill. He had 11 points in the second half, only 1 field goal. How did he get his 11? He went 9 of 9 from the free throw line. He was perfect, and he's had his struggles at the line this year. But he came through huge. I was talking to one of George Mason's coaches, and they said, pretty much every day after practice, they make him shoot free throws. You're going to get better. It's going to click. It's going to click. It always goes back to the work. Fatt Hill has been putting in work, and in the big game, he came through. And then, 9 of 9 from the free throw line. And I'm pretty sure VCU wanted to foul him because of his percentage on the season. I will look that up right now to further emphasize how impressive it was. Whether he was a good free throw shooter or not, it was still impressive regardless, because he had to make those in the clutch, man, where if he didn't make those, it would have been a totally different game, and VCU probably would have stole that game. But he did. He made them, and to get that type of close and that type of production from the line, that's all any coach can ask for, because that's what, against good teams, high quality teams like VCU, well coached teams like VCU, talented teams like VCU, teams with depth like VCU, you got to win the little battles, the little 50-50 battles, the little small battles, and one of that is you got to make your free throws. It's hard to pull out close games, because against good teams, they're going to be close games. It's hard to pull out close games if you don't make your free throws. And tonight, George Mason was unconscious, especially in the second half. They shot 18-20 from the free throw line, 90%. And they only won by 6. Think about that. You know what I'm saying? VCU was right there. They were 12-15. And George Mason got a few more, and they were 18-20. For Fatt Hill, he's shooting 69% from the charity stripe on the season. So I'm pretty sure VCU was like, let's put him on the line, instead of say like a Kory, Mincy or whatnot. And he came through. He was perfect. He was perfect and playing with 4 fouls. So, he did great. And that's how George Mason was able to pull out the win, a very big win. You got to tip your hat off to him, man. It's at that time in the season where it's just extremely hard to continue to win. Especially the more you win, the more teams want to beat you. It could be the worst team in the conference, and they're going to come in and want to just beat you and play their best game, play players like it's the championship, because they want to be the team that knock you off. So in a way, the pressure mounts, but that's good pressure. You know what I mean? And you rather have that type of pressure of winning too much, winning a lot, than have the pressure of when it could easily be the other way. You know, and they can be 1-16, and that's a totally different type of pressure that no one wants, man. But man, George Mason obviously is well coached, got a hell of a staff. The guys that unheralded players, so to speak, unheralded roster as far as national perception. But the bottom line is the Patriots won this game because their guard play. Yeah, Riley Allenspot had a good game, no doubt. Had he not gotten in foul trouble in the first half, he probably would have had 25 plus, been around 10 rebounds and whatnot. But he picked up a couple fouls early in the first half and had to sit for most of the first half. But he made up for it in the second half with his shooting. He hit 16 in the game, 7 or 8. With 3 rebounds. You gotta call it what it is. He was a force, but I feel like the guard play for George Mason won this game. They controlled the game. They took turns controlling the game, so you couldn't really just key in on one guy like Jahari. We're gonna key on him and try to disrupt him, which would disrupt their flow. You know what he did? Cool. I'm gonna just pass it to Kory. Since y'all want to trap or impress me, I'm gonna just pass it to Kory Mincy. Then he got him in their offense, got him in the flow that benefits them. And then when they keyed in on him, here you go, Fatt Hill. Like Fatt Hill had a play where he literally, through VCU's press, he literally dribbled through the entire press, got across half court and got to the Kory, and Kory calmed everybody down. And then he gave it back to Fatt, and then they got the ball to Jahari, and then he scored inside, and that was a big shot. But all that was like all three guards had their hand in making that play happen. But without Fatt Hill dribbling effortlessly through their vaunted press, they couldn't have gotten into it. So that's just an example when I'm talking about with how lethal that trio is, man. When they're on their game, George Mason is very, very hard to beat because now, they hitting shots from all 3 levels, getting to the free throw line. They just control the game in so many ways. And now you so keyed in on them, but they can pass. So now you got Allenspot scoring. You got Troutman slashing and scoring. You got if they miss, you're gonna have Kanga cleaning up or whatnot. Adebayo. It's just a team that just figures out a way to get it done, and they play for one another. They're extremely well coached, and they don't play outside themselves, and that's the key. They play within themselves, and that's why they're 16-1. You know what I mean? And this is like the first time in years George Mason has beat VCU at home. You know what I mean? Obviously, they're gonna have, they're gonna get a round 2 win down there at VCU, so we're gonna see how they go. But all in all, tonight, man, it was George Mason's night, man. So, they leave tonight. Well, this afternoon game, 16-1, still firmly at the top of the A10 conference, man. Hopefully the national people start recognizing what they're doing. Start paying attention not to just them, but the league, the strength of the league. And I believe George Mason should be ranked, not just saying that. I mean, you 16-1, you beat the defending A10 champions. You beat the preseason number 1 team in the conference. The only blemish is at Virginia Tech. What more do you want? You're winning, you're doing what you got to do, you're doing what you should do. They should be able to get in that mix, man. Well, we'll see what happens on Monday, man. But just final key points as to why George Mason pulled it out. They shot 56% from the field of VCU's 47. 88% from the free throw line from the game. They were 21-24. Like I said, they made their free throws. They weren't conscious. They were close in the rebounding battle to a slightly bigger VCU team. VCU had 31. They had 29. Second chance points. They had 10 second chance points. VCU had 12. Now, on the bench points, VCU dominated that with 53-26. Obviously, Djokovic and Terrence Hill had a lot to do with that. Michael Bell had 11 as well off the bench. So, they had a lot to do with that. They carried a big chunk of that. Between Djokovic and Hill, that's 39 points right there. You know what I mean? So, but George Mason had 26, 16 coming from Fatt Hill. And then points in the paint, George Mason, 44-36. Obviously, Island Spotch and Jahari Long going to work. Side Troutman slashing, getting in the paint, scoring. Kanga tripping there. Look, that was huge, especially against a bigger VCU team to be able to control the paint like that and still do damage. And fast break points, George Mason, 11-5, which is not surprising. They're very fast on the perimeter and athletic. They can get it, they can move. So that's, even though I know Skin kind of runs like a offense where they like to slow down, operate more in the half court, let Island Spock and them boys go to work, just establish inside presence, and then their guards, as the game go along, will figure out how they should attack. They can get up and down if necessary. Don't get it twisted. So you turn the ball over, you're not rebounding, long rebounds, and they get off to the races. It can get bad real quick. So you got to be careful with that. And then the most important thing is, out of 31 made field goals, they had 15 assists. George Mason did. So that just tells you the ball movement was on point, and that led to the efficient scoring where they shot 56%, and a variety of guys got touches and got opportunities to score, man. So you got to tip your hat to them, man. Like I said, man, hell of a win. George Mason, 16-1. They will next face, give me 1 second, Tuesday. They will hit the road, battle Loyola Chicago, 5-12, who just lost the GW earlier today. They're struggling. They're 5-12. They play, George Mason plays them at 7 p.m. But like I said, can't go by the record in conference play. The more you win, the more teams are going to be keyed up to beat you. And I'm pretty sure Loyola Chicago will want to get that second, give them their first A-10 loss. But tune into that game. You see how it goes. Obviously, George Mason will be the heavy favorite, but look, desperate teams, Loyola Chicago, they're a desperate team right now. Desperate teams become dangerous. So, can't go. Look, not the time of the season to be going off record, man. You just got to deal with each game as they come, and we're gonna see if George Mason can make it 17-1. After Tuesday's game. So I want to thank you folks for joining me. I'll be back with another episode of All Around soon enough. Y'all take care. Have a good night.